So, good afternoon, everyone. This is Phil Tenalia for the Matrix Goes to School, and it is about 4:32, and I will be starting my webinar shortly. So far, I'm the only one on, so I'm planning on making my webinar. My last webinar was about a half an hour, 45 minutes, and I have decided to shorten them up. And so this one will be also along those lines because everybody's kind of busy doing stuff. And, you know, we will be kind of moving on from here. I do see someone has, looks like Rodney's here. Hi, Rodney. I don't know if you can hear me or not. I'm hoping that you can. Let's see. Can you hear me? Well, if you can, there we go. Hello.
Hi, it's Rodney.
Hey, Rodney. Oh, welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. How are you doing?
I'm doing fine, thank you. So far, it's you and I just started to say that usually what I do with my recordings is similar to, what Kevin does is see who shows up, and then usually I'm just going to give a recording out. So it's always nice to have someone else to play with. So how are things with you?
Things are all right. Things are all right.
Good. Glad to hear it. Now, there is also a chat function there, Rodney. And you and I are coming through loud and clear, but I always tell people that there is a chat function. I don't know if you can see it from your end.
Yep, I see it.
All right.
Use all participants or just Phil?
Yeah. Oh, good. Okay, so I'm always curious as to whether or not sometimes people get on here and they can't find it,
Mm-hmm.
So I tell them to poke around for the carrot, and that usually does it for them. So anywho, since it's just you and I, and it's 4:34, why don't we get started?
Okay. Sounds
You good with that? All right. So you can see my screen pretty good?
Yep.
Okay. So what I just started to say, once a month I give a webinar. Usually I'm shortened it up to about half an hour, 45 minutes, because I find that most people are busy and they can usually take about that much time to listen to the recording, at their leisure, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm going to be doing tonight is October was a bit of a hectic month. I was away for a bit, so I wasn't able to do a webinar down in Arlington, and I did present at the Mid-Atlantic ACBS conference. And I gave my workshop on the Matrix for Schools, and the very cool thing was I had none other than Dr. Kevin Polk in the audience, which was a very interesting experience to presenting the Matrix to the person who created the Matrix.
Right.
And that was a lot of fun. Kevin is a good sport, so he played right along with us, and we had a good time.
Awesome.
So what my value direction is these days, and what I'm up to with this webinar, is getting the Matrix out into the world. And as you know, Rodney is one of my pro-social colleagues who has joined us tonight, and he's been getting the Matrix out into the world at his end. But this is a Matrix for School, and my goal here is to get it out into the world and specifically into schools and classrooms. And it just so happens that the pro-social matrix works great to get classrooms and groups that are stuck or struggling moving. So I got to thinking, it's now November the 2nd, and from my experience and those of my colleagues, I am noticing that some classes are a little bit stuck or struggling a bit. So I got this idea, let me do a webinar on how to fix your classroom, and we'd be looking at it from the matrix point of view. So since you are here with me, Rodney, I would ask you, as I always do everybody, is it okay if I show you?
Yes, definitely.
All right. I get 100% cooperation with that one. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put, I asked this question, and you should be able to see it, Rodney, okay?
Yep.
Yeah. And the question that we always begin with is, who is important to you? And that is where we start. And I begin with the question, and this is how I train others, my teachers especially, to lead with this question when they're beginning to do some matrix work in the classroom. So now my next slide is going to be that question is going to be embedded within the matrix itself, and right now you should see the matrix in front of you.
Yep.
Good. Okay. So, what we do here then is if I would be working with the teacher, and I would be asking them the same question I've asked you before we begin. Let me show you how I work. And everybody says yes. And then the important thing here is to have the matrix up in front of you somewhere, either on a piece of paper that where you're sitting with your colleague or whoever you're consulting with, or up on a whiteboard or a chalkboard, because you're going to be using this to demonstrate the point of view. So, since I am unable to actually draw on the slides, I thought I'd be able to pull that off tonight, but I haven't been able to master that yet. I'm going to pull out my scribbles. And this is an old program that Kevin used, and I stole from him a long time ago, and it works very well for our purposes. And so now I would ask the question of you, and I would ask you, who is important to you? So, Rod, just shout something out.
Wife?
Wife. Very good. That's a good move there. My wife is important to me, too. She's downstairs giving a piano lesson right now.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and then we could probably go into some other people. I'm sure your circle extends beyond her.
Yep, my kids.
Yeah, me too. My kids are important to me. All right, and we could say friends perhaps are important to both of us, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Our friends are important to us. And if you're in a work situation, a lot of times what I'm going to hear is that word colleagues. My work colleagues are important to me. That's something I might hear from them. So we're just getting our list of important people down. And, we're beginning to prime the matrix, which is really a learning model. We're starting to prime things up for people to do some learning. And as we do this, we're going to be moving into this area which we call psychological flexibility, otherwise known as the ability to notice what you're doing and how well what you're doing is working to get you where you want to go, and particularly if you're the teacher in the presence of obstacles, which may be whatever the teacher would be struggling with in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what we're doing here at the beginning is we're setting up a context for what I call productive learning, which is, how we get this diagram up and we're presenting it so that we start to move for engagement. And the best way to move for engagement that I'm finding, and that obviously we've been talking about in our pro-social meetings, is to ask that question, who is important to you?
Mm-hmm.
So then the next question I'd be asking my teacher is, what kind of stuff might show up and get in the way of you moving toward who and what's important to you? And sometimes I find that people might need a little bit of priming here, so I will always kind of go like something like fear might show up inside of you, and you don't want it, and you might try to, you don't want it and you want to try to get away from it.
Mm-hmm.
So what might be something that you would show up inside of you that you don't want to have and you're trying to get away from?
Frustration?
Oh, yes. I experienced some of that myself today. Had a good bit of that off and on. And, okay, so something else that might show up inside of you besides frustration might be?
Self-doubt?
Oh, yes. That is probably right after frustration, self-doubt I hear is like number 2. And that is something that shows up inside of me on a regular basis. Anything else you can think of?
Like indecision?
Oh, yes. That is the cousin of self-doubt. Mm-hmm. One leads right into the other. Right. Do I or don't I? Right? That's kind of the question that rattles around inside of people. Yeah, so we're now building our stuff that shows up and gets in the way, and if you listen carefully to my language, we are starting to frame this stuff up, this unwanted stuff, as stuff that gets in the way of moving toward who is important to you. And we would go on and build that list, and the teacher and I might be talking right now, it's you and I, and then we're going to, anger would be something that I hear a lot of, certainly frustration, certainly self-doubt, certainly, sometimes I get the I don't know what to do. Okay, a lot of times when I'm working with people, that's kind of what they lead in with. And certainly we're going to get to that, but we always start with who's important to you because we want to frame this up in a way that we're developing a very nice collaborative relationship. And starting out with the I don't want to's usually takes me down the road of having lots more conversations about this unwanted stuff. And we're going to get to it, but we're framing it up in a way that is going to be working to help people get unstuck. So then once we have that going on, my next question to people is going to be, well, what might I see you do when some of this stuff down here shows up inside of you? So, for example, if this frustration stuff showed up inside of you, what would I be seeing you doing if I were like kind of seeing you having that frustration showing up in you?
Talking with like an edge in my voice.
Yeah, okay, edgy voice. So I could hear the edge in your voice, right? And it wouldn't be a pleasant, warm, fuzzy edge.
That's right.
Right? It would be kind of a curt, right? A little bit of a growl to it, perhaps, right? So we might have that edgy voice showing up, right, on the outside. If self-doubt were to show up inside of you, you might come up here, and what might you do to move away from your self-doubt?
It's that one's tricky because it's like not doing something, but maybe
yeah. So that might be it for starters. Like you would just not do it, right?
Right. Yeah, or walk away from something.
Oh, classic. Don't know what to do, so I would walk away. And that could actually be something that might work depending on the situation. Indecision, right? So one of the great way to move away from indecision would be to similar to not do it.
Well, for indecision too, one thing that can show up is one behavior is like keep seeking more information.
Oh yeah, oh that's great. Yes, I don't have enough information, so keep researching. Let's put that right.
Yeah.
When in doubt, Google it. Keep researching. Right. Anger, a big one for anger that I hear a lot is people might yell, or they raise their. It goes from edgy voice to loud voice, And I don't want to. Well, you just probably again just might not do it. So that could work on a lot of this. Not doing it stuff is a kind of a default thing for a lot of things in life. When in doubt, just don't do it, right?
Right.
And then finally, I'd be asking the question, again, showing the teacher, when you get over here, this last quadrant, I'd ask you, what do you want to be able to do to keep moving toward who is important to you and kind of take this stuff with you? Well, what kind of things would you want to be able to do? So, for example, to move toward your wife, a very simple thing to do. Would be to move toward your wife. What's that?
Kisses.
Yeah, there you go. Kissing always works. Get you out of trouble sometimes, right? Depending on the situation. Kissing could work. For your kids, we would be seeing you do something like what might you do with your kids?
Reading to them.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Reading, playing with them, right? Something like that. Okay. For friends, you might, if we were here right now and you and I are still on the call, you could still make a move toward a friend. You might do what?
Well, call them on the phone.
There you go. And the ever popular text.
Yep, texting.
You could be texting your friends while you're talking to me, right?
Right.
And call it a twofer. And again, if you're with your colleagues, if you were at a work situation to move toward your colleagues, you might do what?
Seek out their feedback.
Yeah, seek them out. Go and run something by somebody, for example, right? So now what I've done is we've kind of set up the matrix, and we've established what we call loop one. We call this loop one. And this first loop we're doing it for psychological flexibility. We're running people through the experience of noticing, because that's what's going on here in the middle, is we're doing this noticing thing. And you and I have just been noticing about who's important to you, been noticing about some of the stuff that shows up and gets in the way, been noticing about some of the stuff we do to move away, and also noticing some of the things we want to do to move toward. And we get this noticing going, and then when we can get the noticing going, we can start to use this noticing to start to help us to figure things out. And whatever that might be that we're going to get into in just a little bit, we're going to be doing that with the teacher or whoever we're consulting with. So that's the first thing that we want to be able to do with our teacher is to establish this point of view and then continue to say things like I would be saying to them, is it okay if we continue to work from this point of view? And at this point, they're pretty much going to say yes, because they now are looking at the board. We've kind of put some stuff up on the board. Some of the stuff they may, they're probably struggling with a bit. And now once we've done this, we can now move into, what I like to do now is then show them how we can do this within the context of a group. So then what I would be doing is we would be shifting the question, and let me pull my slide down, and let me pull this slide down here for a minute. And now we're going to go to the second question, the second loop of the matrix, and now I have changed the context. Now we have a different question that I would be asking. And now that question is going to be, what is our shared purpose? And sometimes, in schools, what I try to do is I make it even a little simpler. Because sometimes when you're working with younger students, that might be a little bit of a quizzical look. So then we just might make it even simpler and say, what are we here to do? So if I'm working with a teacher and we're looking at this shared purpose, and we would be discussing it right now, what we can do is perhaps if you wanted to, Rod, if you wanted to play a teacher, you could be sitting here and we could be now talking about our shared purpose right now. And if we were beginning to talk about it in those kind of terms, what might be the shared purpose right now?
Well, I actually used to be a public school teacher.
Oh, there you go. Oh, this is awesome. This is great.
Yeah. So you want me to answer it as if I was?
Yeah. Let's try and play it that way and see what happens here, right? Because now I've shown you the matrix. You're the teacher, and now you're hopefully a little interested and curious, and you've come to me, and we're going to try and fix some stuff, and I'm putting that word fix in quotes because, we're not going to fix people. We're going to I'm going to show you a process that's going to help you and your students get more done with less struggling, So now you're going to be saying, what we're here to do, right? So what might that be for you?
Improve student learning.
Oh, I like that. Improve. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, boy. Hold on. Yep. Now my cursor thing has gone nuts. This is the usual. These are the little glitches that happen when we have these. All right, I think I got it down. I'm going to leave that little glitch right there, and I think improve learning. Excellent. Improve learning. And what else might we be here to do today?
Improve student behavior.
Oh, yes. Well, that goes right with the learning, right?
Oh, yeah.
If they're behaving, they're learning. If they're learning, they're behaving. And, of course, they're learning all the time. But we might not like the behaviors they're doing while they're learning. That's kind of the idea here. So it'll be improving learning, improving behaving. Anything else that might come up as a purpose?
Let's see here.
And it could be more than one thing is kind of what we're getting at here.
Yeah, so learning and behavior is so broad. So I was trying to think.
Yeah. That's a good start.
Yeah, there's specific behaviors like improved ability for the students to cooperate with each other.
Ah, there you go. Oh, I love that word. There's the word. There's the C word, cooperation. So you're looking to get some more cooperation from your learners, right?
Right.
Yeah, and that's typically what teachers are wanting. And they're wanting to get that cooperating, they want to get the behaving, and they want to get the learning there because, the other thing is that I hear is basically you want to be able to make a difference too. That's kind of what it comes down to a lot of times is the lament that teachers have when I speak to them is that sometimes they encounter difficulties in trying to make a difference.
Yeah, and as a teacher, one of the things you want to do is, you don't just want to teach them the subject.
Yeah.
You don't just want them to behave in your class. You really see that you've made a difference in the long term.
Exactly. And more and more, when I talk about this setting the context for productive learning, really what we want to be able to do is learning is really teaching them how to learn. The content is important. It's super important. But really, if we can teach them how to learn, then they can go on and learn lots of different things.
Well, so that brings up an interesting thing because one of the first things that came up with is for them all to learn the matrix.
Oh, well, there you go. Right. Well, you're an enlightened teacher, so learn how to use the matrix, right? So let's say you have bought in to this, right? Learn how to use the matrix. which case is going to make my job a whole heck of a lot easier because usually I have to try to show them and have them experience the point of view, and then they begin to see, the value of it and the utility of it. So we have this kind of conversation, right? And then we might then talk about the stuff that shows up that gets in the way. Once we start to have this conversation, and that's where, we could be saying, like right now, if you're the classroom teacher, there might be things that show up on the inside of you, when you go to this shared purpose and you're trying to promote these wonderful values and things here, that shows up that gets in the way for you. And that might be what?
So when I was a teacher, one of the things is like struggling to come up with lesson plans, so it was actually those same things like self-doubt and indecision.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. It's the same thing. Self-doubt, right? You're standing there before your learners, right? Indecision. And I started out as a classroom teacher too, and even all these years later, it's still there, right? It shows up, self-doubt, indecision. What else might be showing up inside of you as a teacher that gets in the way of you moving toward your shared purpose with your students?
I guess I wouldn't always be as organized, so I'm trying to figure out what the inner stuff is. So it's like just kind of a discomfort. Well, I guess what I think it is the indecision would lead to the disorganization. So
Yeah. You just don't know what to tackle first.
Exactly.
I have likened it to like herding cats. You just don't know what you want to tackle first here.
Right.
And you're looking out among your learners, and your learners looking back at you, and you're going, okay, where do I start here, right? So all of these things start to happen, and what I also hear from my teachers are the same kind of things. Like I said, the frustration will show up, right? People get frustrated, and then I get the not enough, and then I would just fill in the blank, whatever that not enough is for you, because some people will say there's not enough time. And, we're always up against that time factor, especially as a classroom teacher. You have so much time with your learners, and if you're changing classes, you have so many minutes with them, and then maybe another bunch comes in, or maybe you're with the same bunch for longer periods of time. But that not enough stuff will definitely show up, and it will get in the way, big time. So, when it comes down to it, then we're just kind of having a conversation, and we're having a conversation about the stuff that shows up on the inside of you that has really been getting in the way of you moving toward that shared purpose. And now, the next thing we're going to be doing here is, when that stuff is happening, and even in terms of, thinking about yourself in the classroom, you might be noticing that you're doing things to move away from this stuff to try to lessen it or control it. And what might some of those things be if that self-doubt were to show up?
So the self-doubt shows up, and one of the ways it would show up is, spending too much time on actually preparing lessons.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
So let's just call it over-preparing, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I remember when I first started teaching, I would go home and do like hours of lesson plans.
Yes.
And just to stay one step ahead of them. So I'd be over-preparing, making sure that I had read everything and I kind of anticipated the questions. So you could spend a lot of time doing a lot of preparing to move away from your self-doubt. And that might also be workable too, and we're going to get to that in a minute. Indecision shows up, and you're with your learners, and you're in the moment, and indecision shows up, and what might you be doing to move away from that indecision?
Oh, good question. Probably... again, spending too much time like researching stuff. Trying to figure out different angles to talk about the lesson, and just mostly like spending a lot of time on it. Yeah.
So if we were to see you, you'd be kind of maybe up in your head, kind of trying to figure stuff out, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's not in a very productive way.
No.
Exactly.
It's like you're in the little hamster wheel there, I call it,
Yeah.
You could feel it turning, and you're looking at people, and you're going, okay. Disorganization would show up inside of you. What might you do to move away from your disorganization?
Well, see, the disorganization, I would say, was probably a consequence of the other thing.
Yeah, right. One leads to the other, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the actual, it's in the external world, the disorganization. But, so it's not, see, I don't know what to say for that one though, but because yeah, I would say the disorganization wasn't an internal thing; it was the external consequence. Yeah.
So that would lead to maybe searching behaviors, right? Where is this, etc. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I didn't bring my blah blah blah. A frustration shows up, and you're in front of your learners, and what might be going on the outside when that frustration is showing up?
Oh, that's like the first year of teaching or something.
Yeah.
I once did something really not cool, which is I said something not nice to.
Yeah, exactly. So you might say something that has nothing to do with anything, right? Like, the frustration would show up. What's that?
Does not help the learner at all.
Yeah. It wasn't about them, right? So we'll just say yell. I'll just like to keep it at yell because that's kind of like you get that edgy thing in your voice you talked about, and your voice yells, and words come out of your mouth, and maybe sarcasm. That might be something that I've heard people say, and I hear it sometimes. You get that sarcasm going on. And then if the not enough whatever shows up inside of you, what might you do to move away from that? And I'll give you this one because here's the number one thing that I will encounter, and we talk about a lot. It's complaint. People will do a lot of complaining, right? There's not enough time, there's not enough resources, and all of that may be true, but then that would lead to a lot of complaining about the circumstances that you're in, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So now if we were to move over to this last quadrant, and again, talking about what would you want to be able to do to move toward this shared purpose, what might it look like if you were moving toward the shared purpose of improving learning or improving learning in your classroom? You might do something here, and even in the presence of this uncomfortable stuff, you might go up here and say, I'm going to improve learning, and I'm going to do, what would you say?
For improving learning, well, one thing might be to get feedback from other teachers on lesson plans.
There you go. All right. So get feedback, right? So you get feedback from a peer, right?
Mm-hmm.
We'll call that peer review, right? How's that sound?
What do you take a look at this lesson plan? What do you think of it?
Yeah. What do you think? Yeah. Have you tried this before, or you got something good for social studies, Constitution lesson, something like that, right?
Exactly. Yeah. That's another one, which is to ask them for lesson plans.
Ask others. Well, let's just put ask others. That's a pretty simple thing that we could see anybody do. Ask others. All right, great. And now we're going to go to improve behaving. Now, what would you do to move toward helping your students become more, whatever that behaving thing looks like for you? How would you want to influence them?
Basically, there's a lot of different things, but one do is to set clear boundaries, clear rules.
Boundaries. Yeah, boundaries. Set boundaries, right? Yep. Rules, always a good thing. Here's how the class runs, kind of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. To move toward that cooperation, that shared purpose of cooperation, what might you do?
Well, besides using the matrix.
We'll put that up. Use the matrix. You said it, so I'm going to put it up there. Use the matrix.
When I taught using cooperative learning, the cooperative learning approach that I had learned, we actually, we had them work in groups, and you would teach these mini lessons.
There you go. Work in groups. Right?
They learned how to. We would teach them communication and problem-solving skills to use.
Yep. There we go. Teach communication. Oh, excellent. Wait a minute. Teach communication and problem solving, and the research on all of that is very good for cooperative learning. It works. Lots of research behind that. Problem solving. All right. And now we're getting into, I would call this the whole, just going to shorten it up, social emotional learning. That's the big buzzword in education, SEL these days. That's just as important as the content is. We're talking more like process stuff. And again, all of that stuff will be helping you to move toward making a difference and all of that. Right? So what we're doing here now is I have now shown you the two loops of the matrix. And what I would be doing now is saying, and now that you've seen this approach, and if you think it would be useful, and certainly I found it to be useful, I could show you how you would use this and to get started with your students in the classroom. And would you want to go into that a little bit?
Sure.
And by this time, people are saying, yeah, what the heck, why not, right? So now to just back up a little bit, and a little bit of, so really what we're talking about here, and we're just starting to get into it, and just that folks know, Rodney is an official Matrix user and a Matrix guy. So not that he's planned, because I didn't tell him to show up, but he knows a bit about the Matrix. And that's exactly where we're going to be going, is we're going to be using a process now to help you get more on top of what you want to do, and you're going to do that by involving your learners. And this is something that's a bit of an oddity for a lot of people, because they think of the classroom as kind of a top-down, teacher in charge, and kids are kind of like, following those rules and stuff. And what we're going to be going to here with the Matrix approach is we're really going to be engaging them the same way that we just engaged you as the teacher. We're going to be doing the same thing with them. Okay. And what I like to do, back up a little bit, is I like to talk about the orientation or the attitude that you want to be taking here, because that's important. And that really starts with the mindset. And I just simply call it the viewing affects the doing. And, we could break it down into two different kinds of mindsets. And this is kind of like, this is the cop, obviously, and this frog here represents the more proactive, and the cop would represent the more reactive. Not that one is good and one is bad, but there are different ways that we relate and that we try to work with groups, especially groups of students. And really what it comes down to is, and back up, is using this matrix to notice which way we want to go in any particular moment. And the matrix works great for being able to help us to do that, because its first thing it's going to do is going to promote this psychological flexibility like we talked about. And then what we're going to do is we're going to be working with the group to promote what we call psychological safety. And it starts really with how you are viewing your classroom situation at any particular time. And, the cop is really kind of what you had just said, Rodney. That would be, is it time to be doing some limit setting? Is it time to be doing some restricting here? Is it time to be doing more directing? Or do I want to be more like my friend the frog here, who is serving a delicious dinner to somebody and getting people to share and cooperate, and it's kind of like supper's ready. It's kind of like inviting the learner into the experience. And it's really a matter of kind of noticing what works, and that would be this kind of workability point of view that we talk about. Now, mostly what we're going to be talking about tonight, though, is the matrix as a proactive intervention. And we can use it at the level of prevention. In other words, we can use it before problems start as a way to just set the table, as it were. And we can be also using it as intervention if we run into difficulties. So we're going to use that matrix to set up this psychological flexibility for individuals and for groups. And when we do that, we're going to be helping people to notice what is working as well as what is not working. So if we back up to some of the language I've been using, I've been using that word noticing a lot, correct? Mm-hmm. And that's really the first skill we want to try to promote with anybody, especially with learners, because I find that typically, like most of us, learners may or may not be noticing what they're doing. And that's what we call you're kind of up in your head, and we're really getting them to do some noticing when we present the matrix to them. And when we do that, we start to then extend that noticing into whatever's going on in the classroom. And that begins to really get this psychological flexibility increased, both for the individual and for the group. So we're noticing workability. This is the workability model, and the matrix is otherwise known as the workability model, because we're using it just for that purpose, to help individuals and groups figure out what's working for them as well as what's not working. And what might be working would be, we could be like this guy over here trying to help reduce stress, and we could certainly be doing behaviors and actions to help reduce stress. And we could also be doing actions and behaviors to promote, creativity. So the idea here is, we're in a situation with learners, the teacher is, and with students, and we're going to be returning to this model here as often as we need to. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. But we want to look at it in terms of what we use the word context here. And the context that we want to be looking at here is what's going on outside of us. So, you'd be a classroom teacher, and Rodney, you can remember these days where you were standing in front of your learners and they're looking back at you, and everybody's having this, what we call 5 sense experience of each other. And while you're having those experiences, you as a classroom teacher are having some internal experiences and some thoughts and some feelings. And the other thing, she's grew up very big here, so I'm going to get her back to size. Hold on. All right, so now she's back. And the learner is also doing the same thing. So we have all kinds of things going on here in the classroom. We got teachers noticing students. We have students noticing teachers. And we want them to be doing that, as well as we're using that matrix to come more into contact with what's going on the inside, too. And the matrix works very well to do that. And because it really is a visual picture of this whole workability thing in action, and it points to what's going on around us, and it helps our students to get this noticing going. And when we're doing that, we're taking in information from our 5 senses, and we're noticing what's showing up down inside of us. And at the same time, the matrix is also going to help you and your learners get into the purposes of the behaviors. And the purpose is kind of like, okay, what am I going for here? So if I'm in the classroom and I'm teaching and I'm going for improving behaving and I'm improving cooperation, is what I'm doing helping me to move toward that? Or am I in this moment having that frustration stuff showing up, we call it the yucky stuff, showing up inside of me, and am I doing things to move away from that? And we can be not only helping ourselves ask that question, and the matrix will help our teachers do that, we can also be using the matrix to help our students do the same thing. So then at the end of it all, we would be looking at, here is my matrix again, and there is this me in the middle who's doing this noticing, and noticing what they're doing, and it could be a toward move, and it could be an away move. And what we want our students to be doing is engaging in behaviors and engaging in actions during the course of the school day, and then noticing what happens when they do those things, and noticing how well it works to get them where they want to go. And usually when we're moving toward stuff, we're talking about moving toward that sense of satisfaction. If you have you had a good lesson or a good cooperative learning activity, and the kids are engaged, and you get that nice feeling like, okay, we're getting somewhere, that satisfaction that shows up. And it could also mean that, you're noticing that something's not working, and in which case maybe the best thing to do might be to go into a different activity. And I'm sure you've had that experience, Rodney.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Yeah. So, and then the same thing that we're doing with our behaviors, we can be looking at what's going on inside of us and what we're doing with this thing called language, because that's what catches us up. We get stuck on those, the frustration, we get stuck on the I can'ts, and the kids get stuck on the very same things. And then when they get stuck on those things, they're down there in their heads, and they're paying much more attention to the I can'ts and the I don't want to's than they are to what's going on right now in the moment. So the combination of these 2 lines really, it gets what I call self-monitoring going, because you can actually teach the students how to do this activity. And also they begin to do what I call self-regulate, where the more they come into contact with noticing what's going on outside of them and where they're at and what they're feeling inside, they get this sense of the pause, which is kind of what this noticing is in the middle. And once we get some pausing going, now we have this thing called the choice showing up inside of us. And now they're in a much better position to choose what we call workable moves. And again, they could be toward moves, and they could be away moves. So that's what we're up to, and we're doing that. We're leading them into these experiences, and what the cool thing about the matrix is we can have that up all the time throughout the day. So the question that we want to be asking ourselves, if you're the classroom teacher, is what I'm doing, is it working to get me where I want to go? And, ultimately to move me toward that who and what is important that we talked about. And if you're the classroom teacher, the who is hopefully going to be including your students that are in front of you. If it isn't, then that's going to be a problem. But if that is the case, then that's what you want to be thinking about. And the what, obviously, is the cooperation and the behaving and the learning and who I want to be. So then when we get this going and we teach our students the matrix process, we can now encourage them to go out there and try it out and develop responses that work. And what I like about this approach is that we strip away the good and the bad and the right and the wrong. And we use this word workable. I was just talking with my colleagues about it today, and we're discussing his class and how well that word works, especially with kids that are resistant or reluctant, because they've been used to hearing good and bad and right and wrong so much that they get gun shy. You know what I mean, Rob? Yep. They're kind of afraid to make the mistake. That fear shows up, and the fear would be showing up over here. If I go back to showing up here in the lower left, and when that fear starts showing up, then they can get very hooked into that, and then they start doing less of these behaviors up here that work, and they do more of that stuff of trying to move away from the fear showing up inside of them. So what we're really doing here at the end of the day is we're really, this is the learning how to learn model. The idea that we're showing kids how the information comes in from your five senses, and it shows up down here in your mind. And then you have responses to the things that are going on around you, and those responses can either be toward this shared purpose of the classroom and what they're there to do and what you're there to do, or they could be doing things to move away from that uncomfortable stuff that's showing up inside of them. But either way, we're really trying to make it okay for them to go ahead and try some things out and make mistakes. And then we can ask them that question is, well, hey, what you're doing right there, is that working to get you where you want to go? And it's the combination of that visual diagram and the language that really starts to get this cooperation going for them in the classroom. And they come up with what I call a wider range of behaviors that they can do, and you are also working with them, noticing together, which is another cool thing about the matrix work, is that it's not just one person doing the noticing, everybody's doing the noticing. So how does that sound so far?
Sounds pretty good.
Okay. So what I wanted to just kind of move into now for a little bit is kind of give the teachers the way out. And the problem that most of us have is that that urge to fix stuff, that shows up. Let's see. Let's get up another diagram here. The urge to fix. Let me see. Okay. So let's see. Here's a teacher matrix, right? Here's teacher here, and here's student here, right? And what I've done is I've just drawn like a parallel matrix thing here. So this would represent you're the teacher, and here's a student, and here's some other students, right? These smaller matrices are his peers. So what we're looking to do here is to get people really on the same page. So if we have this kind of diagram in front of us, let's say, I'm just going to put it right here. Let's say there's a matrix right up there on the board, and that's just what we do. And there's your matrix on the board. And you are the classroom teacher, and you've shown them a little bit. You've shown them the matrix. They've done a little bit of individual matrix work, and that can be either individually, like I said, sometimes we've used little small whiteboards that they could do their own matrix on. They can start their day with that, or you can pull one out if you want to begin an activity. We certainly have tried it that way. And you just basically have the students answer those four questions. The first one being who's important to you. Second one being what might show up and get in the way. Third one being things you might do to move away. And the fourth one being the things you might want to do to move toward. And after a while, if you do this enough, you pretty much all you got to do is have the diagram up in front of people. because it's kind of, once they see it, it all kind of, you're setting that context. Now I'm back to setting this context for flexibility. They see it, and they know how to use it. So after they practice with it a bit, they really do know how to use it, which is very cool. And not only that, if you're using the language of noticing and using the language of toward and away, we've got that shared language going. So now we're beginning to groom this, what I call a group identity by using the language. So if you are a student and you're walking into your, I'm going to put this in quotes, favorite class, let's say it's math, what might be showing up inside of you when you first walk into the room? What would you say, Rod?
Oh, sorry, when you first, like the first day of school or something, or?
Yeah. Let's say it's the first day of school, and I'm walking into math class, and math is not my favorite subject. So what might be showing up inside of me?
Oh, if I was a student, yeah, I might be like, oh, I hate math, or
that's it. There you go. That's the one. I hate math. Right now, that's showing up as an internal thought, right?
Mm-hmm.
They may even come up here and they may even say it out loud. Right? Have you heard him say that to you? I hate math. Right?
This is boring.
Yeah, this is boring. There's the other one. That's code for that's also the away from I hate math. This is boring, right? Yes.
Right.
This is boring. And I'm just writing it down. So that's coming. So that's showing up inside of the student, right? And here you are, and you're the teacher, and that stuff is coming out of them, and it's shooting over here, going into your five senses, and it's rattling down inside of you, and now you're going to have a response. You got this urge to do something down here. Before it even comes out of your mouth or you do an action, what might be showing up inside of you, the teacher?
When the student says, I hate math.
I hate math.
This will be a difficult student.
Yeah, this is a more challenge. We went right for the challenging guy. We're not going for the Mr. Roddy, teach me math today, right? We're not going for that just yet. We haven't gotten there. I'm going to go ahead and say that you're going to have some kind of a uh-oh moment down here, right? You got this uh-oh kind of feeling, right? And it shows up right there, like in the pit of your stomach or someplace like that, right?
Right.
And now you're going to have an urge to respond, right?
Right.
So that urge is going to be, if you have this uh-oh, is it going to be shaded more toward away or more toward, at least initially?
Yeah, it's not a good response.
Yeah, no.
Not a workable response, probably likely to be in a way.
Yeah. So you might want, and if you're not noticing that, really the typical, the thing is you just go shoot right up here, right? Shoot up here and something might come out, and it might be anything, right?
Right.
So to move away from that uh-oh feeling or the discomfort, you might say or do something like,
Oh, I don't know. So they say I hate math.
Well, here's one. Here, I'll give it to you. Somebody might say, "No, you don't."
Oh, there you go.
Right? No, you don't. You haven't even started yet, or something like that, right? Yeah. So then that stuff comes back over here, and it's going to flow back down into the student, and it's going to rattle down inside the student, and now the student, what's going to be their internal reaction to "No, you don't"?
He doesn't understand me.
He doesn't understand me, and I'm putting it over here. I kind of jumped the gun here, but I'm guessing you would put that over here like you wouldn't want that. He doesn't understand me.
Yeah, or he doesn't care about me.
He doesn't care. He's not paying attention. He doesn't understand, right? Mm-hmm. And now that student is much more likely to come up here and start giving more away responses, right? Mm-hmm. And then that stuff's going to start coming back down into you. And now, before you know it, we're moving more toward what I call a less flexible conversation.
Right.
But now let's say you've had a little bit of matrix work, right? And you can notice that, for example, that urge showing up inside of you. And now, when you notice it, you can also notice about what's important or who's important or what the shared purpose is, right? Mm-hmm. And you might come up with something a little bit different. So what might be a more flexible response to the student?
Well, here's something interesting. What is the shared purpose between the teacher and the student?
Yeah.
They both would want to at least gain as much enjoyment as possible out of the classroom.
Yep, yep.
2 things they would share, because a student might not be fully on board with actually learning the material quite yet. But
exactly.
So if our shared purpose is that, then I might do something to more validate their concern.
Yeah.
That they don't like math.
Yeah.
Hard to do that like out loud in public in the classroom.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But
well,
I don't know if the student wants to get into that. But if I have a private conversation, I can say, "Oh, I can."
So you might say. So there you go. So your response might be to have a private conversation with that student, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So there you go. That's a more flexible response because you're noticing your urge to maybe go do something more away, have a private talk, call it, right?
Yeah, where I listen to their concerns and some of their bad experiences have been, and maybe we can do something about some of those things.
Exactly. So you're going to try and join and engage and all of that kind of stuff, right? Because you're a good flexible teacher.
So I'm in a flexible moment.
At least right now you are, right? For right now, you're in the flexible moment. Right. And now now we kind of I didn't get to this too much yet about the shared purpose yet, but let's say that you've already had this matrix up on the board, right? And now you got this thing behind you. You know, it's there. It's kind of like your little cheat sheet. So the idea would be is we could take these words and we could throw them into the matrix. So we do that little move where we would hear the words and we want to try and flex this student up a little bit.
Okay.
So the first thing we might want to try, and I've only got just experience, one of the things that we come up with is we might say yes to that, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, I hear you saying that you hate math.
Got it.
And now we put the and in there. And ... Right? The yes gives you a little bit of a nanosecond to come up with a flexible response. And the and, you can let that drag out. So what I like to do is if somebody comes in like that, I might say yes, and where are they right now, Rod?
Where's the student right now?
Yeah.
Curious, maybe?
Yeah, they're curious, but where are they physically in a 5-sense world? To tell you this, they have to be in your classroom, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have just done something extremely important, and here's how I really slow this down. They have shown up, right? They have come all the way from wherever they're at, right, to come all the way in there to tell you that they hate math and that this is boring.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So what we're doing here is, and this is the other part of the matrix thing, and I didn't get to this, we're leading into this, is the experience of modeling the behavior that you want, right, which would be a flexible response, and then rewarding any little move that they're making in a toward direction. So now they're in the classroom, right?
Okay.
So is there a way for us to make a little bit of a toward move here and take that yes and then add something to it, given what they just did, what we already know?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out what I would say, but I like that you'd say yes. I hear you saying that you hate math, and I'm just wondering what I put after the end.
Well, here's a simple one. I'll give it to you, and I just want you to kind of have that experience a little bit. Yes, and thanks for showing up today.
Oh, okay, that's what you meant there. Okay.
Yeah.
Wake up today.
Yeah. Yeah. Or we can sometimes even throw up, yes, and where are you right now?
And the student says, I'm in your classroom.
Yeah, and thank you so much for showing up. I really appreciate it. I get to do math with people that don't want to do math sometimes, and that's okay. And yeah, sometimes it can be boring. So what am I doing?
I like it. You're actually well, you're providing, I guess, from a behavioral standpoint, you're providing reinforcement for the student expressing themselves.
Exactly. So the first thing about this approach is this student is verbalizing something, right? They're giving me important information. And I look at it as they're trusting me enough to tell me that they hate math. And I'm really okay with that because my job isn't get them to like math. If we can adopt the psychological flexibility point of view, I'm thinking my job is to flex them up, to help them to notice what they're doing in the moment, and to notice that they hate math inside of them, and that they are in fact engaging in a response that I'm calling it a pro-social response because they're sharing it with you.
Okay.
Right? So even in that moment, there's a lot going on. If we break it down and what we're doing here, what you and I are doing, is we're breaking it down from that matrix point of view.
Right.
Into the moment, right?
Okay.
And then from there, if you've already done some matrix work and you've done a little bit of it, you could even say, where would you put that I hate math up here on the matrix board? Where would that go? You see?
Mm-hmm.
So again, now we're listening. We are not arguing. We're not going to try to convince them otherwise. We're going to help them carry that disgruntlement with them forward and see if we can't get them to do a little bit of math. So the goal would be, they're in the room. Now they're in the room and they brought all their stuff, their unwanted stuff with them of all the places they could be. They're in your classroom. Mm-hmm. And once we can acknowledge that and we help them to acknowledge that, then we notice some flexibility showing up. Right?
Got it. Yeah. Okay. All right.
So this is one, and you could use this. It doesn't have to be. I just picked on math class, right? It could be any class that we could do this with, right? It doesn't have to be math, but this is the value of this psychological flexibility point of view and approach because it gives the teacher a way out too. It gives you the way out of the fix. You don't have to solve the problem of the student facing math because what shows up inside of you is what? Oh, I got to do something to, quick.
Mm-hmm.
And
or they try to figure out how to, convince the student that math could be something they would like.
Yeah. And where would you put convincing up there for you? If you're trying to convince somebody, right?
Yeah.
Right? Well, where would that go?
I would put it in the upper left.
Yeah.
In a way move, but they might have a little bit of toward move, hoping that it would. Move toward the shared purpose.
Yeah, you're pushing for some stuff, but there's a little bit of toward in the way there, right? And then you have to throw that out and see how the response of the student, right?
Exactly, and it's not very workable.
Yeah, and if it's not workable, then you want to drop it. I mean, the workability model is all right. Well, I threw that one out, and that's not working. It also frees you up as the teacher to try different things,
Right. Mm-hmm.
And with a more flexible student, that might work just fine, right? I mean, it could work. Right. So we're not going to throw it out, but we're going to say, okay, in this particular context, is this getting us where we want to go?
Right.
In the moment, right?
Right.
So let me kind of go on here a little bit more. I'm going to kind of get that off and go back out because we know it's a fix. Okay, so using the matrix would shift your relationship with your students if you were to do this from feeling more like the control piece, more like less like the cop and more like the frog, right? Because the idea is that trying to fix things can be very useful. Fixing things like leaky faucets and overdrawn bank accounts can usually we can accomplish that with some effort. But trying to fix things like poor motivations or bad attitudes or I hate math gets us into that tug of war with what we don't want. Not only with what we don't want inside of us, but also we get into that tug of war with the student. Mm-hmm. And then people are more up in their heads and less, noticing what's going on in the moment.
Right.
So the matrix really does give us that way out in terms of noticing that urge. And, is what I'm doing promoting psychological flexibility? Is it promoting psychological safety? So just to kind of recap what you and I just did is we want to be more of an influencer. And that's just basically based on these two simple actions that you and I just engaged in, is you remodeling the behaviors that you want. So the first rule of thumb, this is Psychology 101, is we model the behaviors that you want. Because we're social creatures and we like to do what? We like to imitate each other, So if you can model that flexibility, then you greatly increase the chances that you can flex up the student as well. And then the other thing that we do is we reward any behaviors that are moving toward either individual or group purposes. And that's what we were doing with that student in the moment. We were just looking for whatever is going on here that might be a little bit toward and rewarding that. Mm-hmm. And that's how you get people moving and getting them flexed up. And they begin to discover some things that they're doing, right? So it's okay to come into this classroom and tell you, Rodney, that I hate math. You just made that okay to do, right? You're perfectly okay with them telling you that.
Right.
Right? So you're giving that kid permission to come in and have a conversation with you. And really at the heart of the matrix, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to engage people in conversations. And that will lead us right into the pro-social act matrix, which you and I know very well. And that's going to get things going even more, because what we're going to be doing with the pro-social matrix is we're going to be building our team. And our team would consist of both the students and the teachers. And now what I want to do is bring up this great Eleanor Ostrom quote. Kevin shared this with us a little bit ago, and I got it I presented this down in ACBS, and I'll read it because it's a little bit fuzzy. But Eleanor Ostrom is a prize-winning political behavioral economist, and she won the Nobel Prize for the research she did on the core design principles of effective groups. And what Eleanor Ostrom has said is, there is no reason to believe that bureaucrats and politicians, no matter how well-meaning, are better at solving problems than the people on the spot who have the strongest incentive to get the solution right. And in a classroom, who might they be?
Teachers and students.
You got it. Right. And groups can do stuff that individuals can't. And that's what Kevin found out when he developed the group matrix, which he then evolved into the pro-social matrix and then incorporated the Ostrom's principles. And what we have here really is this is science on top of science, because the ACT matrix is based on science too, based on relational frame theory, and based on the theory called functional contextualism, which we're not getting into tonight because you don't need to know all of that to use it to fix your classroom. So the big three design principles that we want to highlight in the classroom are this. We already talked about this, is the shared purpose. And it really is this lack of shared purpose in the classroom where we don't know where we're going that gets us stuck. And what we want to be doing is we want to be able to engage the student in this conversation. Instead of, here's what we're going to do today, it's more of a collaborative thing, right? We're still going to get there, but we're going to do it in a collaborative, shared purpose sort of way. So the first thing we want to do is we want to be able to have that conversation about shared purposes with our students. So in other words, if you're a student in the classroom, what's your shared purpose for being here? And they might say just about anything, Rod.
Yeah, they might say well, some of the students who really are engaged might say, I want to get an A in the class.
Yeah. So I would write that down. So in other words, if I have this loop 2 up here, I'm going to say, great, you're here to get an A in the class. That's your purpose. I'm going to write that right down. What else? Anybody else here for something else?
Somebody might actually want to learn the material and not.
I'm here to learn. All right, great. We're going to put that down, right? Somebody's here is, well, I'm only here because my parents make me come to school.
Yes, that's what I was thinking of, those types of things. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And I'm going to say, cool, you're here for your parents. That's great,
Okay, got it, yeah.
That's great, and now you know something. You know that their mom and dad is important to them, too, and that's going to be useful down the road, too, right? Mm-hmm. And what we're doing, very lightheartedly, is we're starting to put all these shared purposes out, right? I got to take this class to get my GPA up, whatever it is, we're just going to write that down. Mm-hmm. And we're going to and now they begin to see that, oh, okay. And not that they're going to have a vote about everything, because a classroom really is like a benevolent dictatorship. It's really not a democracy, right?
Right.
Would you agree?
Yep, I agree with
that. but at the same time, we want them to know, we want them to feel and really participate. It's a participatory thing where they have a seat at the table here. We're going to do math, but what you're here to do is also important to me too, and it's important to the rest of the group. And other kids see that too, So We're doing this with our group, which really gets the group leaning in. And if you do this with a class, it is way cool because the kids start shouting out all kinds of things.
Right.
And now they're engaged. We're back to that engagement thing. They are now engaged in this process with you, and they're getting on board. And you're having this conversation with them, which really is going to be an ongoing conversation because you can always come back to the shared purpose. And then we can be talking the next thing, Ostrom's principle is collaborative decision making.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're doing all along. I mean, it's built into the matrix. We are collaborating with them the entire time, including if we say to the group, well, what might show up today and get in the way of us doing our math today? And now they're going to say, what are they going to say?
Someone might say feeling bored.
Yeah, I'm bored. There's that I hate math again. Yep, there it is. Write that up, right? I'm tired. I'm hungry. I got too much homework to do. And we put all that stuff up there too. Right? We're getting all of that stuff up on the board.
Well,
and go ahead.
We respond to it, like when the person says, I'm here only because my parents want me to be. The kind of the positive way you respond to that really encourages more responses.
Yeah, and you just hit upon it. You just said it right there, Rod. I want them to respond to me in the moment. Yeah. And everything I'm doing, and as you know, everything we do with the Matrix is really encouraging people to respond. Because the more they respond, the more engaged they get. The more engaged they get, the more curious they get, the more they lean in. Mm-hmm. And the more willing they become to kind of keep going. It's like you're priming the pump. You're priming the pump for learning. And they begin to see that there's a lot more to this than just, numbers. There's a lot more going on, and that what they say matters too. Because a lot of times kids in school feel like they don't have a say,
right?
And what they say doesn't matter. And we're going the other way. We're going, no, this is like we're all in this together. And what I also would say is, as a classroom teacher, I'm putting my stuff up on the board too sometimes, right? So I might say, my allergies are really killing me today, or I'm really frustrated because I was stuck in a traffic jam. So I'm going to model that flexible response myself.
Mm-hmm. Got it. All right.
And as I go through the class or the lesson, I can notice my toward moves and away moves as well. So it's not just the students that are doing it. And then the third thing is we're going to be talking about a little bit before we sign off tonight is this monitoring stuff. And monitoring is very important. You got to be able to come back over here, and the monitoring is what's taking place with the five senses. How do we know if what we're doing is moving us toward the shared purpose? Well, we got to be paying attention to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is a biggie because it's keeping track of how things are going, asking this question of how we're doing, where are you or me or him or her on the matrix right now, where we put ourselves. You have these random acts of noticing, I call them, where you might just stop the class and go, hey, class, where do we put ourselves on the matrix right now? Where are we? And then somebody might say, well, we're more on the toward side, or right now we're all kind of in our heads trying to figure out this math problem. Okay. And it's just that promoting this noticing in a very flexible sort of way that keeps that creativity and engagement, going when you need it to. And if the class is running along, you don't, you just keep doing what you're doing. But these two cross lines are behind you, and you could use them anytime you want. And we find that when we're doing this, the people that I've trained to do this and the teachers, it really frees up their teaching because they let go of this, I have to fix it, I have to control it, and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So, then the other thing that we're using is this shared language of toward. We're using the shared language of away, and we're building this group identity over time. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So to just kind of recap, we could use this. You could do daily matrix work. Some classrooms can use this as kind of a check-in in the morning, or you could use it at various points during the class during the week, or as often as you think you need to. And the kids can use it too. They can pull this thing out and use it the same way that we're using it. And what I find is that the kids will begin to use the language. You'll hear them using the language of noticing, toward and away, where are you? So at the end of this, what we're really looking to do, and the best way to fix a classroom, in my opinion, is, and I'm going to use that word fix in a very, quote quote, fixed way is we're going to introduce them to a process. And the first thing that I do is I introduce the teacher to the process, the way I introduced you at the beginning of the webinar tonight, by promoting the psychological flexibility in you first, and then showing you how it might be promoted with the group. And we're setting this context for productive learning. And then later on, we're going to get to that shared purpose. We come back to this as often as we need to. And we collaborate, continue to collaborate, and we continue to monitor. And we just keep cycling through. We cycle through these things. And then what happens is classes really take off, especially if your class is feeling a little stuck or a little struggling. And then kids, the cool thing about this, Rod, is the kids will come up with some solutions for you, too. Yeah. Yeah, and that's a biggie. If they come up with something that works and you, oh, wow, that's a great idea, that's terrific, and then people start saying, oh, wow, this guy really means what he says. He really is interested and he is listening to what we're saying. And we could even say, well, let's try that out and let's see if it works. So you create this environment for kids that they get a little less gun shy and they get more willing to show up and do things and make mistakes and then we learn from them,
Okay. All right.
So that's basically what I wanted to show tonight, is how we could just very easily, didn't go into too much detail because I just wanted to show a process tonight that any teacher can use. You can be a regular ed teacher, you can be a special ed teacher. It works great for all levels, and I have used it at all levels, and I've shown teachers to use it at all levels, and it really is a very cool thing to do. So what I would leave people with is this. I always ask people to show the matrix to someone, and Rodney, I already know that you show it a lot and you use it a lot. But those of you that have been on the webinar, please go ahead and try it out if you haven't already. Nothing bad will happen. Am I right, Rod?
That is true.
Yeah.
At least not yet, anyway.
Well, unless you're trying to use it for nefarious reasons, if you're moving toward a group purpose, pretty much, everybody kind of, something really neat happens. So you get something out of it every time you do it. And your kids really get something out of it, too. And they really like it a lot. I mean, it really is kind of cool. And they really start to kind of come up with stuff. And then when that whole group, you get that satisfaction of a group pulling together, and that's way cool, because then they realize that there's stuff that they can do together that they might not be able to accomplish on their own.
Right.
Right?
Right, yeah.
So what do you think? You're a former public school teacher, Rod. Could you see this being of use to people?
Oh, yes, I can definitely see that. I mean, I used to do the Schools for Teachers thing, and I would totally use this in the classroom, actually, if I were teaching still.
Yeah, it works great. I mean, the teachers that really grab a hold of this stuff, they use it all the time, and it just becomes part of their repertoire. It just becomes something that they do.
Right.
So there you have it.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Rod. Thanks for playing with me tonight.
Yeah, no problem.
And I'll probably catch up with you next week.
Yeah, next week at the Mastermind, yep.
All right. Take care.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.